All right, we are here to do a walkthrough of practice quiz number 2 for learning target 4. Let's start with standard 4.1. Identify the pair of congruent shapes and then explain how you know using rigid transformation. So what I do is I look at this grid here and I look for, well, which shapes are congruent? Try to identify it. All right, well, if we look around here, what do we notice? What do we notice? It looks like A here, an F triangle that's 2 units high and 5 units long. So A is congruent to figure F. Now, how would I transform A to get it onto F? Is it lined up? Well, it looks like they're already pretty lined up. So all I would have to do, they will match up perfectly when I translate. If I were to slide A down, it would match up perfectly on top of F. All right, the other one, B and H look pretty similar here. So B is 1, 2, 3, 4 high, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 long, 1, 2, 3, 4. Great, they are the same size. So I know figure B is congruent to figure H. Now, how would I make B end up on H? Well, I can see here, I'd kind of have to flip B over. Now, if I have to flip it, that means I'm going to reflect it. They will match up perfectly and I reflect, but it's going to be a little bit below H, so then I'd have to translate it up. All right, so that's standard 4.1. Let's move down to the golden standard 4.2. Now, for this one, identify if the triangle is congruent and identify the parts that are congruent. So how do the pieces match up? Okay, so starting with angle A. So angle A is right here. Angle A, look at that marking right there. That's a congruent angle marking. And that angle, what does it match up with over here? You see that same shape right there. Okay, so A must match up with R. Oops, sorry, I wrote another A. So A matches up with R. Now, what letter matches up with B? B's down here. I travel from A to B along the side that has one congruent marking. So if I travel from R along the side that has one congruent marking, I see that goes to S. So B matches up with S. Therefore, my last letter must be C matches up with Q. So triangle ABC is congruent. I should put a triangle symbol there to triangle RSQ. Now, how are they congruent? What markings do we see here? I see a side marked, an angle marked, and another side marked. As I read around the triangle, I see side, angle, side. Two sides marked, one angle. The angle is between the two sides. So these two are congruent by side, angle, side. All right, let's match up the pieces. Angle ABC matches up with, corresponds to what other angle? Well, ABC, keep the same pattern, is going to match up with RSQ. Now, CAB, just rearrange it. Third letter, C corresponds to Q. A corresponds to R. B corresponds to S. Third letter, first letter, second letter. ACB, A corresponds to R. C, the third letter, corresponds to that third letter. So C goes with Q. B, second letter, goes with the second letter, S. All right, same deal with the segments. AC, segment AC matches up with, well, AC is this one right here. You can see it in the picture. It has the two marks for congruent side. It match up with this one. Also AC, A goes with R, C corresponds to Q. So it corresponds to segment RQ. Oh, and to be clear, these should all have angle symbols in front. Oops, my bad. Keep forgetting my symbols. Don't forget your symbols. Segment AB, that's right there. It has one congruent marking. So it matches up with this one right here. A goes with R, B corresponds to S. It's a segment. Don't forget your symbols. Lastly, BC, the one with no congruent side markings. So it's this one over here. B corresponds to S, C corresponds to Q. Correspond your parts. All right, that's Golden Standard 4.2. Let's move on to Standard 4.0. All right, now let's move on to Standard 4.3, Part 1. Here, we're trying to prove the triangle's congruent, if possible. Justify each step. So let's start with our claim. The triangles are congruent by. Well, let's see what we got. I see a side marking, and then I also see a congruent angle marking and another congruent angle marking. So I see an angle, and a side. We got to decide, is it ASA or AAS? Well, is the side between the angles or next to them? This is the side between them. It's not that one, so it must be angle, side. All right, let's go through our evidence. I like to go match my claim. Angle, side. First set, we're a set of congruent angles. I can see that C is marked congruent to E. So let's put angle C is congruent to angle E because it's given. All right, what other angle do we see? I see this angle over here. Angle B is marked congruent to angle D because it's given. And then my last one, the side. What side is congruent? Well, this side right here with the congruent marking to this side here. If I'm going to start with B, so segment BA, I want to keep the corresponding side, so B corresponds to D. So it's this side. I want to write it as DF, not FD. How do I know? It's given. Now let's summarize our evidence and take it to the conclusion. Since we have two sets of congruent angles and a congruent side next to them, not between, that's why it's AAS, we know triangle ABC is congruent to triangle. What matches up with A? A matches up with F, B matches up with E, and angle C matches up. Oh, sorry, got that wrong. B goes with D. Apologies. So that should be FD. And then C matches up with E. So it should be FDE by angle, side congruence. All right, that's step one. Great. Let's move on and look at part two. This is where we have to identify the errors. So how are the triangles congruent? What do you have here? What information? I see congruent sides, and an angle. Two sides and an angle. That's definitely not angle, side, angle. So two sides and an angle. The angle is between the two sides. It connects the two sides. So instead of ASA, this should be side, angle, side congruence. Now let's check the evidence we were given. Segment AC is congruent to segment QP since it is given. AC, one congruent marking. QP, one congruent marking. Good. Check. Segment BC is congruent to segment RP because it is given. BC, two congruent markings. RP, two congruent markings. All good. Angle ABC is congruent to angle QPR because it is given. So ABC is congruent to QPR. Something seems off there. So ABC, well, that's not a given angle. B is not marked at all. So we probably want to talk about the marked angle. So instead of ABC, we want to talk about this angle right there. So that one we should probably call ACB. That way, right? C has to be the middle letter there. And then it's congruent to angle QPR. Is that right? Does AC go with QP? It does, because it is given. That's true. Therefore, triangle CAB is congruent to triangle RPQ. Now, does that line up? C doesn't correspond to R. C corresponds to P. So we need to change this to be P. A corresponds to Q. And B corresponds to R. So PQR. And then we knew angle, side, angle was not correct. So we're going to change this to be side, angle, side congruence. All right, last part here. Standard 4.4. Write a logical argument to prove corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. That's our acronym, CPCTC. We're going to finish with that. So let's start with our claim. Our claim is to prove this true. So our claim is angle R is congruent to angle U. That's our claim. Now, what's our evidence? Well, let's break it down. Before we get here, we have to prove the triangle is congruent. So let's look at our evidence. I see angle S is congruent to angle V because it's given. What else do we see? I see this congruent side right there, those markings right there. So I can see segment RT is congruent to segment UT. Why? Again, because it's given to us. So I've got an angle and a side. That's not enough. I need more than that. Okay, I need a third angle, I need another side. Well, remember, it's a bow tie looking thing. Bow tie angles we call vertical angles. This angle right here, those two angles are congruent. Those are vertical angles. So how do we name that angle? This one on the left, let's call it STR. So angle STR is congruent to angle VTU, right? V corresponds with S, so we start in the same place. Why? Because they're vertical angles. All right, got to recognize those vertical angles. So what do we have? So let's summarize our evidence and our reasoning. Since we have two sets of congruent angles and a congruent side next to them, we can see that triangle STR, now be careful how you correspond the sides, S corresponds to V, T corresponds to T, R corresponds to U, by angle, angle, side congruence. Now, in this one, in 4.4, the last thing we need to do now, that's not our claim, that's not our goal. Our goal is to prove this. This is our claim and our conclusion. Therefore, angle R is congruent to angle U by that great acronym, CPCTC. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. All right, hope that's helpful. Good luck.